I want to talk about your new fabric line because it's so beautiful and I
Oh, thank you.
can't wait to buy some. I'm really excited. But so yeah, let's tell everybody what it is and where you got your inspiration and everything.
Yeah, it's called A Break. It's my first fabric collection with Riley Blake Designs.
I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. I am so excited today to have Fran of Cotton and Joy with me. She's another Pacific Northwest quilter like me, and I am so excited to have her here. So welcome, Fran, with me. Hi.
Hi.
Well, thank you for being here. I wasn't familiar with you until I was at the Quilting Bee in Spokane, and I mean, you were there with the trunk show, so I want to
Yeah.
know everything about you. So, but how long have you been quilting and what got you into quilting? We can start there and yeah.
Yeah. So I've been quilting. I learned to quilt when I was pregnant with my oldest son, so about 8 years now.
Okay.
And I guess you could say that that nesting desire that you get while pregnant, that's really what got me wanting to learn to sew. And I didn't know anything about sewing.
Yeah.
um and one of my friends was like, well, there's this group here in town. At the time I was living in El Paso, Texas, and she said, there's this group here in town and they get together to sew. They might be able to teach you since you want to make things for your baby. And I kind of did something that I would never do and reach out to these people that I don't know who they were. And they were like, yeah, come over to our group. We meet on Fridays. And I met with them. And one of the ladies in the group, she taught me how to sew. She taught me kind of like all the basics of sewing. And from there, we ended up moving to Germany. My husband was in the military, so that was a lot of
Okay.
moving.
Okay. I was going to say, I
um,
saw that you lived in different places. I was going to ask you. So anyway, sorry, keep going.
yeah. So then, at that point, we had another kid. We had them 2 years apart, almost to the day. um, and while we were living in Germany, I had pretty bad postpartum depression. And one of those nights, I was just kind of like on Pinterest, and I started finding like all these modern quilt patterns, and that's kind of how I got introduced to sort of that side of things. And once I found sort of the Instagram side of it, it just there wasn't any stopping it, basically.
Yeah. It's a freight train that cannot be stopped.
Yes, pretty much. That's pretty much how it went.
Wow. Wow. So you're from Chile, right?
Yes, I was born and raised there. Moved to the States when I was 15.
Okay. That's so cool. Was there quilting there? Like, is that something that was part of that had you seen it
Um,
growing up or?
no, I feel like it's sort of a very American thing,
Oh,
quilting. Um, I no, like nobody in my family was a quilter. My grandmother used to sew, but she was more of like a garment sewer. Um, but yeah, no quilting.
yeah. I'm just always so interested, like, because you always hear about American quilts and there's all these historical things, but I'm just like curious to know what it's like in other countries too. Just like, is it something that you've seen since you were little and then that inspired you, or like, yeah. So that's really cool though that you were able to pick it up so quickly and
Yeah.
it gave you something to do while you were pregnant. I mean, it's a time consuming project, so
Yeah.
you definitely have something to work on, but that's
Yes.
cool. So, um, so you learned how to quilt, and then what interested you in starting to design patterns? Like, were you just not finding what you wanted, or?
Yeah, it was sort of that. I was working as a web and graphic designer, so I kind of had the designer brain, I guess you could say. And I started quilting. Um, mainly following patterns from other modern quilters like Nicole from Modern Handcraft and Megan from Then Came June, Susie Quilts. That was kind of like my introduction to modern quilting. But I would get these ideas, like my designer brain. I couldn't turn it off, and I would get on Pinterest and like search and search, and I wasn't really finding what I wanted. And I Googled, like, how do you make a design, like a pattern design? Because I knew you had to sort of like worry about the like the seam allowance, but I didn't know how like the math side of it worked. And so one day I just kind of sat with like a graph paper and pencil. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I need to figure out this idea that I have.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that got started.
Yeah. That's so cool. I say I am not good at it, but like I end up working designs myself, and not anything that I would be like, I'm gonna sell this, but and my mom is very designer minded too. Like she'll just see fabric and she's like, I know what I'm gonna do with it. And she creates a pattern and I'm like, wow, I don't know. But
Yeah, it's definitely, I don't know. It's good and bad because I have a way too many ideas and not enough time to make a third of them happen.
sure. Right. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't have enough hands. And
Yeah.
a mom of
There's
two
just
young kids.
Yeah, there's just not enough hours in the day.
Never. I know. I'm like, oh, do I have to sleep? I could just keep quilting.
Yeah, that's
Oh
pretty
man.
much how that goes.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, so up at the Quilting Bee, you have a lot of your quilt patterns are on display in the shop. Um,
Yes.
and so I was like walking around after I met you, I was like walking around shopping, of course, because I was like, I'm in a fabric store, I might as well. And I was like,
You
that's one of
gotta.
hers. That's one of hers. I was like looking all around and you had a handful in there and they're beautiful. And I was like, wow, that's a really pretty quilt. And I'm like, oh, that's Fran's. Like,
Oh, thank you.
so I think you have a great unique style and they just pop like you leave space for using awesome fabrics and using focal point fabrics. And I think that's kind of fun with like the modern fabric lines that are coming out, which you now also have a fabric line, which is why
Yes.
you were there, which I want to talk
Yes.
about in a minute. But like I think I really gravitate towards the more modern patterns because they do lean to or like lend to using the modern fabrics that have, big prints and stuff you want to show off. And older patterns seem to have a lot of tiny pieces, whereas more modern
Yeah.
patterns have bigger blocks, bigger, you know, just bigger aspects so that you can really showcase those fabrics.
Yeah, and for me, it comes from it's kind of like a two part for me when I make like those big blocks. One part of it is I do want to be able to showcase like fabrics. I mean, now, yeah, I'm obviously have my fabrics, but before it was, we all have our favorite fabric designers, and it's like a shame when you have to cut this beautiful fabric like into these teeny tiny pieces. But then the other side of it for me too is I want to make it fast. And the
Right.
bigger the block, the faster this quilt will be finished. And so
Yeah.
that my designer right now goes to that side of it. It's like I want to make this fast.
Right. Like, how can we be more efficient?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. And, quilts with more pieces are fun. Sorry, there's like loud sounds outside.
It's okay.
Quilt patterns with smaller pieces can be fun, but I think the longer projects I get burned out on. I'm like, okay, I just want this to be finished. But when I can whip out a quilt
Yeah.
top in a day because the pieces are larger and it still looks really cool, like I can really appreciate that. So thank you for being someone who designs patterns meant for that. I love that.
It's definitely part of it's just like as a mom, I don't have a lot of time. And it's like the satisfaction of finishing something fast
Mhm.
and beautiful. Like I like that um to have that in my projects.
Yeah.
There's definitely like a time to have those more complex and lots of smaller pieces type projects. But in general, I like the satisfaction of something fast.
I agree. I'm with you. It makes a difference. And I think that can be kind of a barrier to quilting for people because they're like, oh, it's going to take me forever to make a quilt. But really, I mean, I was just talking to my friend who she does the podcast with me sometimes, Miranda. We were just talking about patterns and how, you know, you don't even have to follow a pattern. You can just sew squares, you can get a layer cake or a 10-inch stacker and you can just sew the squares together. Like just do something, you got to start somewhere, but
Yeah.
also when you're ready to branch out from the simple stuff, it's nice to have simpler patterns that are fast finishes to work into to build your skills and how important
Yeah.
that piece of it is, and that there's so many modern pattern designers out there doing that for quilters to get more people into the craft. And I really appreciate that. So I
Yeah,
love
I definitely feel like when you look at some of the older patterns, it's all very sort of complicated and you look at them, especially if you're a brand new quilter and you're like, I could never like
yeah. Yeah.
I just what?
Yeah.
But sort of having something that you can look at and say, oh, I can make that. I think it's very important. Especially I feel like um there's the sort of new generation of quilters,
Mhm.
like myself, that don't necessarily have family that quilted. Like your mom didn't quilt and your grandmother didn't quilt, and they're learning themselves. I was very fortunate that I had somebody that did teach me to
Yeah.
quilt. Um, but especially since the pandemic, I think there's a lot of quilters that just taught themselves how to quilt, via YouTube, via Pinterest tutorials, things like that. So I think it's important to have sort of that bridge of easier patterns, and there's sort of a place for all levels of
Yeah.
skill.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's one of the things that I I say it a lot and I feel passionately about it, but I just think too long it was like a quote unquote granny craft, and now we're seeing all this modernness come into it. We're seeing younger quilters and like people are teaching their kids, and so it's kind of reviving itself. Um
Yeah,
Love that. I mean, my mom tried to teach me to sew when I was younger and I didn't take to it. I was too anxious to like learn how to use the sewing machine and whatever. But I saw it my whole life. I was always around it.
right.
So I've always been creative. There's always been creativity, but I think now that I can share this with my mom, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of slowly teaching my nieces and like my best friends do it. And we're teaching, their daughters. And um, but yeah, like that bridging that gap between like the super intricate patterns and like just sewing blocks or squares together, it
Yeah.
like you said, it bridges that gap and it allows more people to hone their skills and come into the craft, which I love. I think it's amazing.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely more modern. Like when I first started quilting, my husband was like, my grandma used to do that.
Mhm.
But now I'm like, no, like look at all these people my age.
Right? Yeah, I think that's the fun part too. It's like my three best friends do it. I mean, we have a little bit of an age range, like probably about 10 years from between the oldest one of us and the youngest one of us. But
Hmm.
like we're all quilting and it's fun to have friends and know that there's more people out there. I'm not just like a random weirdo in my 30s who likes to do an old lady craft, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think Instagram definitely helps with that. I
Yeah.
know it's kind of a love-hate relationship with Instagram.
Mhm.
But sort of having that community aspect is really fantastic.
Right. And that's another avenue that's like brought quilting to the modern era, I think, because you can see instead of just having this idea in your head, like, oh, that's for old ladies, or oh, it's just brown, you know, ugly fabric, you can see all these different inspiration pieces and
Hmm.
see modern design and see modern fabric, and it's out there and available immediately. You don't have to wait till it maybe shows up in your local quilt shop, or
Yeah.
it's definitely made it more possible, I think, for more people to get involved, which is cool. But I agree. I have a love-hate with Instagram too. So
I think everybody does.
yeah, it's hard. I don't I don't want to use it as much as I do, but I'm also like, well, I got to run my business. So
Yeah, and then I wish they would stop changing, like, add the reels, add this, add that. I'm like, can I just share the pretty pictures?
I know. I know. I'm so nervous about reels. I made like 2 and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I've made a handful, and I'm always like, well, here it goes.
Yeah, I'm like, something, right? It's out there.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about your new fabric line because it's so beautiful and I
Oh, thank you.
can't wait to buy some. I'm really excited. But so yeah, let's like tell everybody what it is and where you got your inspiration and everything.
Yeah, it's called Daybreak. It's my first fabric collection with Riley Blake Designs. Well, my first fabric collection ever. And I'm with Riley Blake Designs. The inspiration behind it was sort of springtime in the garden that I grew up in. Like our house kind of had this, it wasn't very fancy by any means. It just, but it had a garden like in the front of the house. And um my grandparents loved spending time there. My grandpa had some of his special flowers that he had, and then my grandma had this beautiful lemon tree in the front of the house. That it was kind of like her pride and joy. And a lot of basically all of the motifs come from my memories spent in that place with my grandparents.
It's so pretty. It's like, yeah, I love the bees and the yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna put like some photos up in the
Okay.
video so people can see it. I'll also link your stuff in the show notes so that people can get to it. But oh,
Okay.
it's just so pretty.
Thank you.
And then did you release a pattern with it or
Yes, there were two patterns that went with the collection. One is called Lumineers, which is a fat quarter friendly pattern, and then there is Squared Up, which is like the 10-inch stacker, like layer cake. Very, very beginner friendly. Just some straight lines. And yeah, those were the two patterns that go with the collection. And then as you saw at the quilting bee, they also used some of my other patterns and used the collection with it. That's what was there.
yeah. Okay. I just wasn't sure because I saw so many different, quilts in with the fabric collection. So I was like, I didn't know if you had released patterns specifically with it or not, but it's so pretty and I know it's so exciting to like, I think just because I had this like idea that, fabric designers are on this pedestal and like, and obviously you have a design background, so that I'm sure helps, but it's just nice to like know that, you know, people are just out there living their dreams, I guess. Like, it's just so cool. And we love Riley Blake. So that's like a really cool thing to just like see
Yeah,
somebody get to do that. And it's amazing.
I still can't really believe that it happened.
Yeah.
Like up until it actually shipped to stores, and then when I got my sample, because part of my contract is I get a bolt of each fabric.
Yeah.
Before it actually got to my house, I was like, I'm obviously dreaming this. Like I am gonna wake up and it was all just I made it up in my head, like it's not really happening. And even through like each step, because there's sort of like different steps to the fabric design process, I kept being like, they're gonna pull this, like it's not gonna happen.
They're gonna
So
change
it's
their mind.
very strange too that it's out there and it did happen. People are making things with it. And it's just like the weirdest, but also like most amazing thing.
Yeah. That's so cool. I Yeah, I don't know if that's ever something in my future, but I just get so excited hearing about people who, you know, who make it happen for themselves. And it just encourages me to keep doing what I'm doing, but also like I want to talk to everybody. Like what I mean, yeah. So do you have to like, did you like mock up your idea and send it to them? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I did work as a graphic designer before. That said, I am completely self-taught. Like I didn't go to college for this. I just kind of fell into the design life. Um, so I kind of had this crazy idea in my head, like I would really like to design fabric. So then I researched. I was like, what? How does that even happen? And what I found is that it's an area of design called surface pattern design. And then I was like, okay, so what do I do to add that to my skill set? And I ended up signing up for a course by Bunny Christine. She designs for Art Gallery Fabric. She has a course on how to become a surface pattern designer.
Oh.
So I went through that course, and then what I did was I created a portfolio with 3 collections basically. And within the collection, it showcased obviously the collections, and then I also added mock-ups using my existing quilt patterns. And I sent it to 3 different companies, and one of them was Riley Blake, and they're the ones that I signed with. So
That's so
that was
cool.
kind of like the process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's so nice to just know that like you don't have to have fancy degrees and you don't have to have like, you know, really you just have to be creative and make pretty designs and someone will like your stuff and help you make your dreams come true. Like it's accessible, which I think is it's cool to see because then it makes it not so scary for other people who might, maybe have a really artistic brain and just don't know what to do with it. But that it's an
Yeah,
avenue.
definitely. Bonnie was definitely a big inspiration to me because she also doesn't have a design degree. Like she went to school for business.
Okay.
And yeah, and she talks about it a lot in some of her like Skillshare classes or like on her Instagram. She was like, you don't have to go to college. Like if you have the sort of the talent, obviously, so the natural talent, but also just the determination to make this happen, like you can do it. And I was like, oh, I don't know, but
Yeah.
it did happen.
Yeah. Well, it worked because you have a fabric line.
Yes. Yes, and we just announced the second one that will ship in December, so that's coming out. It's very
Oh,
exciting.
that's so exciting. Oh my gosh. I'm excited for you. That
Thank
is
you.
so cool. Oh my gosh. Well, I can't wait for
Yeah.
that one now. Is it
Yes.
holiday themed or is it?
Yeah, it's called South Hill. It was inspired by our first year in the South Hill neighborhood here in Spokane. Like I mentioned earlier, my husband was in the military and he retired at the end of 2020. So we bought a house and sort of it was like our first, like, okay, this is our forever home.
Yeah.
So it's inspired by a lot of sort of the memories that we have from that first year um, in this house. So
Oh my gosh. I'm looking forward to that. That's so fun.
yeah, I know the quilting bee will carry it. I like showed it to them and they were very excited about it. So
Oh, good. Oh man, they're so nice. I love them.
yes, they're amazing. They're like very supportive and just very I don't I keep saying that, but they are just so supportive. Like they're
Yeah.
just very nice and
Mhm.
um they're willing to get to know people like in the industry. I feel like a lot of the times when you meet some of like the quilt shop owners of somebody that's younger, they're like, um
Yeah.
it's kind of like a weird feeling, but they're not like that at all at the Quilting Bee. So
No, I just was sure they were gonna say they were gonna ignore my email asking if I could interview them because we were gonna be up there. I have so much family up there, and
right.
I was like, they might say no, but I'm still gonna ask. And they were like, of course, and you have to go meet Fran. Like they were like, they asked me like 3 times while I was there before like we were getting ready. They're like, have you talked to Fran yet? I'm like, I've been in this room the whole time, so no. So they were
Yeah,
like,
no, they also like they emailed me and like they called me. They're like, we're gonna have a podcast here. You should really meet with them. It's gonna be great for you. And I'm like, oh, I guess. I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know if they want to talk to me.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
I
love
was
that
like,
about them and just how like about the how much they're about the community and like
"Mhm."
supporting and like connecting people.
Yeah, yeah. And it's people like them and shops like that are gonna help keep quilting like more active and make it easier for people to get into it because you walk in and if they're there to help you, you can tell right away. Or if they're just there because they're like, well, I just wanted to own a quilt shop and I don't really care about anything else. It's like it makes a huge difference. So I love
Yeah, it
that
does.
they're
I'm like,
supportive of you, and that's so
yeah,
cool to have
you can definitely tell when it's like the difference
that.
in just the culture of the quilt shop. It
Hmm.
makes a huge difference, and I love the quilting bee.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm like, "Ugh, I wish you were in Boise because I want to shop at your shop every day."
Yes, it's very dangerous to have them in your own town.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they're like in the valley, and I'm like in the South Hill, so there's like a little bit of distance.
Yeah. It's not just right down the street.
Yes, if they were right down the street, it would just I would live there.
Yeah.
Like, hire me to work and just put my paycheck into like shop credit. Because
I'm sure they'd figure it out for you. Oh man. Yeah. So it was like really serendipitous that, we just happened to be there on the same day. And
yeah,
I was like, I don't know who this person is, but I'm very excited to meet her. And then
yeah,
it was your trunk show for your new fabric line. And so getting to see your patterns and your fabric and meeting you in person, I was like, oh man, this is so fun. I love everything about quilting. And just the people I've been meeting and getting to meet people like you who are, you're you're doing it. You're making it happen for yourself, and I just think it just makes me more inspired, and I want to share that with everybody. Like, look, it's so cool. You can do whatever you want in quilting, and there's an avenue for it, there's a way.
yeah. It's still very weird. You're like, yeah, I'm doing this and it's successful. Like my brain still hasn't quite fully caught up to it.
Right. And it's one of
Like
those
I
things
still
too.
don't quite believe it.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I never envisioned myself being this, like quilting and podcasting. Like I was a teacher. I had a completely different path ahead of me. And then I was just like changed it. And I think that's part of it too, is like I never envisioned myself doing this,
Yeah.
except for recently. And so I mean that's probably, at least that for me, would be the hurdle in like wrapping my brain around it.
Yeah, no, it's a weird thing sometimes. That's just happening.
Yeah.
Like like this is really my job. I quilt and design things.
Hmm.
That's my job. It's very strange to think
Yeah.
about.
And now you're immortalized because your name is on fabric with a major fabric design company. And that is so cool. It's like being a rock star in the quilt world.
Oh, I don't see. I don't like feel like that at all. I'm just
You
people keep
might.
being like, "Oh, you're like famous." I'm like, "I'm really not though.
Right.
I'm
You're
just
like, oh,
doing this thing from this office in my basement." Like
right. You're like,
it's not as glamorous.
yeah,
So I
it's
don't
still
know.
cool. Um, that's so cool. I'm just like real excited for you. Can you tell my face? I'm like, I can't stop smiling because I just keep thinking about it. I'm just like so happy for you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So you have another one coming out in December, you said, and then are you gonna have patterns that come out with that as well?
I am sort of reusing one of my existing patterns because it just works really well with that fabric. And then there's going to be a new pattern coming out with that. I'll probably be releasing that November or December. I haven't quite figured out my schedule that far.
Yeah. Yeah. Day by day.
Yes.
That's so cool.
But yeah, that's sort of how I'm doing that one.
Yeah.
It's two patterns. It's very exciting, but it's also like a lot of work to do
Yeah.
two patterns for that collection.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And do you use pattern testers when you are creating a new pattern, or do you just work out the kinks yourself, or?
So I use both a tech editor and pattern testers. So sort of my process is I design the pattern and then I edit it myself and I make a sample of that first pattern to work out some of the kinks. And then me and Matt have never been the best of friends. So I send it to a tech editor and she helps me figure out the math. And then I recently also hired a copy editor to sort of specifically look at the instructions side of it. Because English is my second language. And so sometimes I feel like, am I wording this right? Am I not wording it right? I don't really know. So they help me get it in pretty good shape. And then I do send it to testers. I have a group of probably about 10 testers that have been with me for a while now. And some of them will pass on it, some of it do it. It kind of depends on their schedule as well. And I'm pretty laid back. I just kind of want to make sure that it's not horrible at that point, that it makes sense. Yeah, that's sort of my process for the pattern side of things.
Yeah, I've done some test patterns and it's so valuable because then you see the finished product and you're like, I helped do that. And but also I think as a designer, I would want somebody to go through my work with a fine-tooth comb, because that, again, that accessibility, if your pattern is written poorly, people can't make it, or they're going to just get frustrated
Yeah.
and be like, I'm never using one of her patterns ever again. But so
Yeah.
that's cool. And it's nice to have a dedicated group that you can rely on to help you do that.
Yeah, they've been really great. 3 of them have been with me since I started in 2019. Like, and they've tested almost like every one of my patterns.
Oh, wow.
So I owe them a lot. And then some of them have like come and gone, but it's a pretty, I would say, like solid group of 10. And I adore them.
Yeah, that's so cool. And that's got to be nice, feel nice too, just to know they've got your back. And
Yes.
again, it further builds the community, because I think you're entrusting your, what's it called? Your creative, like your intellectual property. That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
Yeah.
you're entrusting them with that. And I think that's an important way as quilters that we can show our trust and build the community better, is to help each other out in that way. So
yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm at a point where maybe I could do this without using testers, just because I do have the 2 editors that really do go through my patterns like very thoroughly. But at the same time, I love the community aspect of testing. I know that's one way I got started when I first sort of really got into quilting, was testing for other people. And one of the things that got me really interested in modern quilting to begin with was seeing how quilters supported each other, and seeing those interactions. A lot of it does happen on Instagram. But sort of seeing sort of building each other up, that, and at the time, like I said, I was pretty bad into like postpartum depression, and sort of seeing women supporting each other and building each other up. And you see pattern designers like sharing other people's pattern designs, and just sort of seeing that it's really community over competition. I feel like that's a very important part of modern quilting.
Mhm.
So that's why I continue to to use testers,
Yeah.
even when sometimes I'm like, I could release this so much faster if I didn't go through the testing process. But I
Right.
like having that as part of my process.
Yeah. And I love that. Like the thing that helped you in a hard time is something that you're giving to other people now. And I think as human beings, like that's one of the best things we can do is like, hey, this really helped me. Now I'm going to use that to help others and bring people
Yeah.
up with me. And I think that's really important. And especially in at least in my, this is my opinion and you don't have to share it, but I just think like sometimes there's some of the older quilters, they have kind of a snooty attitude about it. And I don't want to perpetuate that ever. And I think there's, you know, people like you and other people we've chatted with here on the show, and everybody really wants that same goal of like, no, we want to bring everybody with us. Like we want to help each other and hold each other's hands. We don't want to push you away because mine's better than yours and have that
Yeah.
kind of attitude. So I think it's super important to keep perpetuating the positive and bring people with us and supporting each other through those hard times. And you know, creating something can be such a great outlet for hard emotions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's awesome that you had quilting and that you're doing that for other people. So that's really cool. Well, do you have one of your like is I can't talk right now. Um, which one of your patterns would you say is your favorite, or do you have a favorite?
Um, it kind of changes, and it kind of depends on what we're talking about. I think as far as sort of my favorite design right now, it's um Memi's Lemons. That sort of holds a special place in my heart because it was inspired by my grandma and her lemon tree, and it's just a very sort of fun springy design. But as far as my favorite one to make, I love Joyful Stars and Midpoint, and that's because they're both very fast, satisfying makes.
Yeah.
So, but it's kind of hard to pick one,
Yeah.
especially because I think not my next one. I'm currently working sort of like I'm in the middle of a pattern release process. I just sent it out to the testers and I'm kind of working on that. And that one's special because it's my first take on a medallion quilt. I've always wanted to do a medallion, but it's also kind of it's it's a very difficult pattern. It's definitely not a faso. But then the pattern that I have in in my schedule for after that one, I am just so excited about it. It's like I cannot contain myself about it. So I think that one will become my favorite one.
Yeah, that's good. It's kind of like whatever your latest one is, that's your favorite.
Yeah.
I can understand that though. It's kind of it would be hard to choose because they're all your creations and you wouldn't put it out if you didn't love it. So
Yeah.
that would be hard to choose. I just like to ask because I was just always curious. I'm always curious about, if there's one that just holds a special place or, but I can understand the lemons being having that more nostalgic part of
Yeah.
your heart, and that's so cool. So how many quilts do you have in your house? Like, do you keep all the quilts you make or do you give them away?
I don't keep all of them. I do keep all of the cover quilts, because I do use those for trunk shows and things, and sometimes I'll have quilt shops. Like right now, like 5 or 6 of my quilts are at a quilt shop in Texas.
Oh.
Because they were having like a shop hop, and they wanted to display them. So I do keep all the cover quilts that are not used, which is kind of heartbreaking. And then I usually, because I make multiple samples of the patterns, there's usually one that I keep for me, and those get used. And then if I do make another one, it's usually like a gift, or sometimes I'll sell some of them. So I honestly have no idea how many quilts are in my house.
That's okay.
I know each of my kids has at least 2. I gave one to my husband as a gift. My mom has probably 3 or 4 of my quilts. And then there's sort of a rotating stack of quilts that makes it through like our living room, and it just kind of depends on which ones are clean and which one got, I don't know, potato chips on it. I'm sure there's quilters that are like cringing at that, but I believe quilts should be used, like unless they were specifically made as art quilts, like use the heck out of that quilt.
Yep. No, I'm with you. I mean, I rotate them off of this wall behind me because I made a display wall in my living room, but when they come off the wall, I wash them and I put them back out into use in the living room or in the bedroom, like, because yeah, I strongly believe quilts are made to be used and loved, and yeah, unless it's specifically art, I mean, wrap your body in it, like let the
Yeah,
little
like
kids
that's why
play
you
in
make
it.
quilts. Yeah. And like whenever I do give quilts away to like either family or friends, I'm like, please use this. Like, if
Mhm.
I'm giving you a baby quilt, you better be using that for tummy time, and your kid better spit on it. Like,
No,
I want you to use this.
yeah, I tell people the same thing. I'm like, please use this. I did not make this for you to tuck it away and never use it and look at it. Like,
Yeah.
I want you to. Here's how to care for it. It's cotton, just wash it, you know?
Yeah.
And I just think people are scared to ruin it, which I can understand that too, because they know it's a great gift and that a lot of time and effort went into it. But I am also like, yes, and please use it.
Yes. I'm like, the only way a quilt gets ruined is if you put it like in the back of a closet and then it gets like eaten by moths or something. Like,
Yeah.
otherwise, just use the heck out of it.
Yeah. Wear and tear is expected. You want it to get
Yeah.
softer and worn in. And oh,
And
yeah.
those are the best quilts when they've been washed a few times.
Hmm.
And you got that nice crinkle on it and
They're soft.
nice and soft.
Yeah. I'm also, I have a hard time putting anything but minky on the backs of my quilts. So,
Yeah, I only done that once. I did it with a pat with so the one to keep
mhm.
for one of my patterns last year, and now I'm like, I need to do this with every single one.
Yeah, we literally started carrying minky just because we wanted it to be able to have it whenever we wanted it for quilts.
Yeah, because that quilt gets fought over when it's on the sofa. When it's in a living room, it gets fought over because it's just such a cozy quilt.
Yeah.
So now, like every time I make one that I know I'm gonna keep, I'm like, this is gonna get minky on the back.
Yeah. It's it's good. And it just makes it 10 times cozier.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's nice. My mom made me a graduation quilt because I got a master's degree and then promptly quit teaching. But but the one she made for me, it has like one of the luxe minkies on the back. So it's got longer
Mm.
fibers, super luscious and soft. And I was hiding it away because I'm like, she put white minky on it. It's got white background. I was like, I'm terrible with white things. I just destroy them because I spill everything on them. So I had it tucked away and I said that. She was like, excuse you, miss, preach it to the choir that you want people to use their quilts and then you have one tucked away. I was like, fine. So I finally brought it down into the living room. And the first time my husband like laid on the couch and put it over him, he was like, what the heck is this? I was like, do you like it? Because his quilt that I made for him has just regular minky on the back.
Yeah.
This is like extra soft. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is dangerous. And so it just has like an extra special factor to it. So anyway, I could talk about Miki all day. But well, that's fun. I was gonna ask you a question. I just totally blanked out. I'm so sorry. This happens to me all the time because I'm such a ding dong.
It's okay.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what it was. So do you have any like tips or advice for people who want to get into quilting or to new quilters that really helped you out?
I would say it's probably easier said than done, but just kind of go for it and let go of like the idea that it needs to be perfect. 'Cause I know social media makes it seem like we're all very great at quilting and we have perfect points and things like that. But it's called cropping. I crop out the points that I don't, if it's a bad point, it gets cropped.
Mhm.
And it's called I love and hate relationship with the seam ripper.
Mhm.
You can always rip out a seam and try again. So just kind of just let go of that thought that it needs to be perfect and just try again. And it's just fabric at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like you can always try again. It can be painful if you use very pretty fabric.
Mhm.
But you can always try again.
Yeah. I love that. And I always say that, like, don't get caught up in the perfection of it because 9 times out of 10, just like you said, what you're seeing has been curated and the flaws are edited out so that you only see the good parts. And so I think that lends to that love hate, like you said as well. Just like, I don't want to see only perfect. I want to see people mess up. I want to know that the quilters that I admire are also humans and not just like perfect robots. And so,
Yeah, no, I use the seam ripper a lot.
mhm, me too. I hate it so much, but I use
Especially
it.
if I venture into the land of like foundation paper piecing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's
I, I still haven't figured it out. I don't, my mom, we had a client ask us to make the book nerd, um, like from
oh
the book
yeah.
pattern. She just wanted 4 books. She didn't want the whole quilt because she just wanted it as a wall hanging. And we were like, oh, great. Yeah, totally. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's paper piecing. And my mom was like, I'll figure it out. And she did it all. So, I mean, I can't take any credit for any of it, but she had to seam rip a bunch and redo a couple of stuff of the parts because it's it's tricky. You have to think backwards.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to think backwards and then right when I think it's like, okay, I think I've got it. I don't.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't.
I have one printed out. I want to make like a diamond
Mm,
hang to frame and hang in our guest bedroom. And I just am too scared. I haven't even started. I'm like, I don't know what to do. But man, yeah. Seam
yeah,
rippers are
I have one. The last one I made was it looks like a record player and I made it for my best friend. Because she has this like sort of minty color record player and
oh,
that's I made it sort of minty color for her and oh my god, my sewing room was just like papers everywhere. There was 2 sections, I had to do twice. I was like, okay, so this is why I don't do foundation paper piecing. This is
the
horrible.
results are great, but
Like
it's
it
the
looks amazing.
mhm,
But now I think my brain kind of was like, okay, it wasn't as bad as you think you remember. So I
mhm.
have one printed out and it's the Space Needle.
Oh.
Um, this designer I follow, she did a series last year of like different landmarks. So she has like the pyramids, she has like the Sydney Opera House, the Big Ben,
Mhm.
and she had one for Seattle. And I was like, I have to have that. So
Yeah.
it's sitting there on my shelf, and I look at it, and I'm like, maybe I can do it. And then like, no,
You're like,
it
"That's
is a
cute."
Like, it's very traumatic experience.
Mhm.
So when I feel like I'm ready for another traumatic experience, I'll do it.
When you completely forget about that trauma, you're gonna start a new trauma.
Pretty much, yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I am scared of paper piecing, but also, yeah, seam rippers, as much as seam ripping can suck, it's you have to do it. Like, don't ever let a single person tell you that they don't ever have to seam rip because it's not true.
Yeah, no. There might be 1 week where I don't seam rip that week, but like it's rare.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like if I don't have to do it much in one project, I make up for it in the next project because then it's like
Yes.
I very suddenly forgot how to quilt and I don't know what I'm doing and I mess everything up. I'm like,
Yes, it's always at the end too for me. It's like when I'm adding sashing and like doing the rows together, like also the wrong row on there or something. I'm like, I just want to be done with this.
yeah.
Why? Or if I the other type of project that always makes a seam ripper come out a lot, it's anything that's set on point.
Hmm.
For some reason, on point setting is just it messes with my brain.
Yeah. I I've never set anything on point. Nah. No, I haven't. I'm like, wait, did I? No, I haven't.
Yeah,
And
no, I have two patterns that have on point setting, and they were released 2 years apart for a very good reason. Um,
you're like, I needed a break.
I needed a break. And then this last one, I made 3 samples for that, and every single one of them got seam ripped up. It got ripped at some point because it was just, I was
Oh,
like, I wrote the directions for this. Why am I not following my own directions?
you're like, if I can't follow my own directions, I don't feel very confident about any of this.
And I was like, why did I mess this up? And then I'm like reading the pattern, I'm like, oh, I added a note on here to avoid this. And I didn't follow my own note. And then I did it again on the next sample. It's like, oh my God.
Like,
I
well, I
need to make sure
obviously,
to underline this and make it bold,
yeah, highlight, underline, bold, large print,
larger font.
yeah. Arrows.
Like, follow this. If you read nothing else in this pattern, read this one sentence here.
Oh man, that's so funny. Like, why isn't this working? I'm like, no, not following the directions. That's why.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Are you ready for them?
No, but let's go.
Okay. Do you sew over pins?
Yes,
Okay. I
I
do too
do.
sometimes.
I don't use pens a lot. But when I do use pens, they get sent over. And then I change my needle
Yeah.
when I'm
You're
done
like,
with that project.
yeah, I haven't ever had any bad luck with it, but I keep hearing people like, no, why would you do that? So I've kind of have stopped. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I don't want to unpin it because I want my seams to be perfect. So I'm with you. I
Yeah.
just kind of sew over them.
I've
And if I need to change my needle, I change my needle.
yeah, I've bent a few of them. Like, oh, that was a bad hit.
Whoops. That's
Really
funny.
make sure you change the needle after this one.
Yeah. Ooh. Do you like trim your threads as you go, or do you just kind of hope they tuck in and hope for the best?
If it's dark fabric, like if it's navy fabric, I'll trim as I go. Otherwise,
No.
a rat's nest.
I'm like
It's
so
bad.
neurotic. I'm like trimming every little thing. It takes me so long. It makes me so slow, which is like super annoying to myself because then I'm like, why am I taking so long? I'm like, oh, because I'm like every little thread or piece of fabric that sticks out. I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, hacking at it. And my mom's
Yeah, like I used a lot of white fabric. So if it's
Mhm.
anything super bright, like hot pink or like a navy fabric or black fabric, I'll make sure to trim those. Um,
Yeah,
Otherwise, the white fabric never gets trimmed.
no,
Never.
you're never gonna see it. Do you square your blocks before you put them together?
Yes, 100%.
It makes
I learned the hard way
Yeah,
to make sure I always square my blocks.
yeah. I used to not, and I've started forcing myself into the habit because every time I do, I have great results, and every time I don't, I just get frustrated because things don't line up right. So
Yeah.
worth it. And then are you an iron your seams open or iron them to the side kind of person?
Open. I'm an open kind of gal.
Okay. Okay.
Um, for borders and sashing, I'll do to the side just
Mhm.
because it's easier. Um,
Yeah.
but 98% of the time, I press everything open.
Yeah. I'm the same. I like an open seam. I hear arguments for pressing to the side, but for some reason I just immediately want to start ironing them open, and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah, I feel like it gives you a flatter quilt.
mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I agree." Awesome. Well, that was all my rapid fire questions. Not so scary, right?
no.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you online?
Yeah, on pretty much everything, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. My username is Cotton and Joy, and then my website is cottonandjoy.com, and you can find me on there.
Yay. And I'll link
Fine.
everything below so people can
Oh,
just click and find you easily. But yeah,
thank you so much for having me.
yeah, I'm looking forward to getting your current fabric line and seeing your new one. And I'm really glad we met each other. So
Yes. Thank you, Quilting Bee.
yeah, thank you, Quilting Bee. We love you. All right. Well, I will see you later, hopefully soon, and good
Yes.
luck with everything. And yeah,
Thank you. You
yeah,
too.
thanks.